This is Leela Srinivasan, Chief Marketing Officer at Lever, and I'm on the next RecTech podcast.
Welcome to RecTech, the podcast where recruiting and technology intersect. Each month, you'll hear from vendors shaping the recruiting world, along with recruiters who'll tell you how they use technology to hire talent. Now, here's your host, the mad scientist of online recruiting, Chris Russell.
That's right. It's time for RecTech, the only podcast that helps employers and recruiters connect with more candidates through technology-inspired conversations. If you listen, you'll hear both recruiters and HR tech vendors talk about how they use tech to find talent. And if you listen, I promise you'll get better at recruiting overall. All right, so this episode of RecTech is sponsored by our friends at Jobs in the US. If your company needs to hire more local talent, jobsintheus.com lets you post jobs for free on their national job search engine. They also operate 51 local state sites for every state in the country, including DC. Online since 1999, the job boards they power will help you connect with more local candidates. Learn more again at jobsintheus.com. And by the way, listeners, if you like this podcast, you'll probably enjoy what I listen to in my car as I ride around. Shows like the Chad and Cheese podcast. A couple of my recruiting tech friends started this crazy podcast you got to check out. The snark is thick, the intel is good, and they don't pull any punches. Check it out at chadcheese.com and learn about the news happening each week in online recruiting. Again, at chadcheese.com. All right. Lever is part of a new crop of applicant tracking systems that are turning heads and making the hiring process better for companies and candidates. They're also doing a great job at marketing themselves, and I wanted to tap into that with their CMO. Leela, welcome to RecTech.
Thanks so much, Chris. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. So we've known each other on Facebook, I think, for a while now. I don't think we've ever met in person yet. But,
one of these years.
One of these years, exactly. You going to HR Tech in a few months?
Yes, both HR Tech in Vegas and then also HR Tech Congress in Amsterdam. So hopefully I'll see you at one of those.
Nice. I'll
definitely
be in Vegas. Hopefully Amsterdam. That'd be nice. Well, thanks for coming on the show. And I was taking a look at your LinkedIn profile this week as I was doing some research for the show. So Leela, you have quite a career path. I didn't realize you used to work at LinkedIn. I'm curious what that experience was like and what you learned from that about selling and marketing to HR people.
Yeah, so I look back on my 4.5 years at LinkedIn with great fondness. It was a fantastic learning experience for me, I think. And to give you the context, when I joined LinkedIn beginning of 2010, the company in its entirety was 500 employees. And I was one of 3 marketers on the team for LinkedIn Talent Solutions. So that business was really just getting started in a way. And when I left 4.5 years later in May of 2014, the company was 6,500 employees, and the team of 3 had become 60 or more, plus a support team in marketing ops. And so it was really a great period of very exciting part, to be part of that journey, of course. And I think while I was there, I had always had a fascination with and passion for talent and mentorship and, helping people achieve their potential. But I got even more wrapped up in the idea of that while at LinkedIn, given their mission and vision for the organization. And I tried to leave the industry, but ended up coming back. I just couldn't stay away, which led me to Lever. But back to the LinkedIn story. So I think what I learned there was that recruiting and HR folks in general have this great appetite for learning. They love to get better at their craft. They love to learn from what others are doing. They love to share what's working. There were community after community of advisory councils and special groups that I hosted or put together, and I was always really surprised in a pleasant way of how open recruiting leaders were to sharing, even with companies that, on the face of it, they sort of directly competed with.
Sure, yeah.
Which I think speaks to the sort of the combination of art and science that goes into great recruiting. Some of it's repeatable, and some of it, frankly, isn't. Overall, I think it was just really interesting to spend so much time with this community who were, basically they were social before the advent of social media, but post-social media, it's only really heightened the sense of community and sharing and appetite for learning that I think the community has in general.
So now you're on a new journey with Lever. Tell us, first of all, how big is the team right now? And then I'm curious, tell me more about how you got the job.
Yeah, so Lever we're around 120 employees today. When I joined, which it'll be 2 years next month, 2 years ago, we were about 40. So we've obviously tripled in that time, which has been, again, an exciting growth story.
Yep.
And how did I get the job? Well, I was minding my own business at OpenTable, running their B2B marketing and building out a product marketing team. And frankly, I got tapped on the shoulder by a headhunter.
Mm-hmm.
And
who found you on LinkedIn, of course, I assume?
Find me. Actually, I don't know. I think it might have come through my personal email. So I'm not quite sure how she found me. But she said the magic words, Sarah Nam. Now, Sarah is my CEO. She is an ex-Googler, and a lot of what makes Lever is Sarah, really, and Sarah's the way Sarah thinks about the world. And I had heard about Sarah from a friend who had actually interviewed a few months previously to be Lever's VP of Sales, and it didn't work out. But in the process of helping advise her through that decision, she kept talking about this woman, Sarah Nam, and how extraordinary she was. Mm-hmm. And so the reach out I got from the headhunter was, will you have coffee with Sarah Nam? Lever is looking for a CMO, and we thought, you might be a potential fit for the role. And so it started, I couldn't not have coffee with this person I'd heard about. Right. And, the hour flew by, and, at the end of the interview, Sarah looked at me and said, "Do you have any more time today?" And I looked at my calendar and said, "Well, not really, but, it's Friday. I'm booked till 6:00. I could come to the office at 6 for an hour." Mm-hmm. And so I did. So I interviewed twice, basically, in the first day, and then we packed it in the following week. And from my first conversation with Sarah to me accepting an offer was 12 days. Wow. Which is kind of crazy.
That's a pretty short hiring cycle.
Yeah. But they've been looking for 8 or 9 months before that to find the right person. And so for them, it felt like an excruciating journey to find me. For me, it was just this whirlwind. But so many things made sense when I talked to Sarah, and when I talked to customers of Lever and the industry, realizing where they were in their journey and how I thought I could help them. It was just the right opportunity.
Yeah, excellent. Great story. So Leela, there's tons of ATSs out there. I think there must be at least hundreds of them, right? It's crowded markets. There's more starting every day. I just read about another one that just came out. What makes Lever so different?
Crowded market, Chris. That's the understatement of the year. It's bananas, actually. But so why have an ATS, or what makes us different? So I think the way Lever's product has evolved is truly different. In order to explain that, I have to go back to the founding story a little bit. So Sarah, Nate, and Randall are our 3 co-founders. Sarah, our CEO, ex-Googler. Her first job actually out of school was she was Marissa Meyer's speechwriter at Google, if you can believe that. And so she came to that role from Stanford Design School. So she's a classically trained design thinker. Nate Smith, who's our CTO, came from Olin College of Engineering and also had a heavy design thinking component to his background. And our third co-founder, Randall, was a friend of Sarah's from Stanford, who had gone down in a more entrepreneurial path and was looking to really build fantastic tools. And they all knew they wanted to solve a B2B problem, but it was only really when they started talking to dozens and dozens of leaders back in 2012 to help unpack, what were their biggest challenges to growing and scaling their organizations. And every single person said, it's hiring. The way hiring works has transformed, but the tools that support it, and principally this core piece of cruddy software called the applicant tracking system, has not changed. Sure. And that was sort of the beginning of this journey for Lever. And so the fact that design thinking was part of our DNA from the very beginning meant that the way we set about solving the problem was to embed at Twitter for 6 months. And the team of, I think, 5 or 6 Leveroos at the time sat 10 feet from the recruiting bullpen and spent a period of several months while Twitter was 700 employees scaling to 1,500, trying to observe and shadow every participant, every stakeholder in the hiring process to understand why was it that people kept saying that hiring was broken. And so I think there were 2 things that came out of that have stayed with us till today, even though the relationship with Twitter broke after 5 or 6 months when the founding team realized they wanted to solve a problem that was bigger than Twitter's immediate recruiting problem. And the 2 things were, first of all, making sure that we solved from the beginning for better proactive recruitment. And so if you think about how hiring has changed over the last 15 or so years, the internet clearly has completely transformed the landscape thanks to LinkedIn, but not just LinkedIn. It's never been easier to find people than it is today in some sense. And so, of course, that's led to the rise of passive candidate recruiting. It's led to the strongest recruiting teams who are looking for trying to fill these hard to fill positions, knowing that they need to get proactive. They can't just sit back and wait for active applicants to come in. But what was missing from the market was a system that allows teams to look holistically at their talent universe and have the right tools and technologies in one platform to cater to both nurturing of passive candidates and also engagement of active applicants. So that's the first thing, is that from the very beginning, we've contemplated how do we help recruiting teams solve for both their proactive needs and also the need to really deliver an incredible candidate experience.
Talk more about that. Talk more about that proactive part of it, because I think that's something that is kind of unique, if you would.
Yeah. So, and I saw this at LinkedIn, of course. So LinkedIn Recruiter, of course, was built, is the tool that rose to be LinkedIn's flagship product. And I was the first product marketer actually for talent solutions. So LinkedIn Recruiter was my baby for about a year there. And, I remember when we launched that at the time, it was partly the job of the marketer was partly to just get the success stories out there, but partly also to teach the industry. And when I say the industry, I mean, principally in-house corporate recruiters who hadn't necessarily developed all the skills and techniques to recruit passive candidates, to know how to do reach outs effectively, to know how to be successful with that audience. That was as much of the battle as just getting the name of the software out there and helping people understand that this was an option. And, I think you flash forward now 6 or 7 years, and most teams who are recruiting certainly white collar labor, but also, I was talking to somebody the other week that recruits highly skilled technicians for workshops, and it's not what you would consider white collar, but it is in demand. High demand, low availability of workers, and in all of these situations, the onus is on you to try and identify the pool of talent that might be a good fit for the role and go out and proactively try and interest them, try and engage them in that conversation.
Right.
And so I think what we've done differently at Lever is, from the beginning, as I said, we thought about how we could provided a great Chrome extension, provided teams with sort of basic tools to help do that. But then within the last 10 to 12 months, we launched our second product, Lever Nurture, which the whole purpose of which is to solve for helping recruiting teams be efficient at what has been a fundamentally inefficient part of the recruiting process. If you think about how frustrating it is to reach out to a set of passive candidates, how daunting it is, how the technology in the past has always, you've seen recruiters trying to tack on sales tools like Mixmax or ToutApp, or doing things in their inbox that don't hit their ATS until way later. It's just really hard to stay on top of everything. It's hard. It's so easy to drop the ball as a sourcer or as a full cycle recruiter who's doing proactive outreach as part of your strategy. So what we've done with Lever Nurture is basically provide sourcing automation tools that slot right into the Lever platform to enable teams to just get dramatically more efficient at what they're doing. And by that I mean we're borrowing from the playbook of all the marketing automation tools that have existed forever. So if you look at a simple drip marketing campaign in a platform like HubSpot, what you do, you decide how many reach outs you want to have in a period of time. So let's say over the next 6 weeks you're looking to you set up 6 or 7 different messages that are going out to that in the marketing case prospect, in a recruiter's case sort of potential applicant or candidate. And each message is personalized. The messages are timed. So the first message goes out. If there's no response within X number of days, the second message goes out, and so on and so forth through that entire sequence. We enable recruiting teams to send for a hiring manager. So if you think about the difference in a chief technology officer, for example, reaching out to a software engineer versus a recruiting coordinator or a technical recruiter, no offense, recruiting team, but the CTO is far likely to get some sort of response. So facilitating the ability for teams to do that seamlessly with that CTO's permission, of course, being able to just help teams be much more systematic about the way they approach candidates, and then automatically advancing their stage in Lever should that candidate respond, whether it's a positive or negative response, so that they then, you then revert to human conversation. The net result of all of these things means that we've seen recruiting teams double their response rates overnight.
How challenging is that, Leela, to the average, recruiter user that you're putting this into, for them to actually understand this technology? Because they're not marketers, they're not techie people. How much of a challenge is it to kind of teach them on this new type of, quote unquote, proactive recruiting?
Yeah, so it's a great question, Chris. And in fact, I had this conversation recently with someone who works at a competitor's firm, and they've had recruitment marketing tools out there for a while. And I think one of their challenges had been actually driving adoption. Going back to what I was saying about leverage differentiation, I mentioned design thinking and design. And, we still get props to this day for having the product that people seem to think is the best designed, is the most straightforward, intuitive, seamless, easy to use. And that is also reflected in Lever Nurture. So it's pretty straightforward to set up. It really is. I mean, we haven't had, there isn't, as with the rest of Lever, there isn't a thick manual that accompanies the rollout of Lever Nurture, right? It's designed to be intuitive. And I think that, that again has been an area of advantage for us. So far haven't had any issues with customers, adopting it and actually, using it to the full once they have it in their hands.
Yep.
I didn't get to my second differentiation, though, or second insight from all this Twitter stuff, right?
Let's go back there.
Yeah. So, and I think I've heard Matt Charney and others talk about system of engagement, moving from a system of record to a system of engagement. And I think, one of the early insights of all this time that we spent at Twitter was that recruiting was failing because companies had not put usable technology in the hands of everyone involved in recruiting. Now, that applies to the candidate experience and the candidate process. So think about, applying to a job through a website and just that experience. But it also applies, I think, more critically to the broader team involved in hiring. So whether it's making it super easy for your hiring manager to get involved, whether it's making it incredibly easy for an interviewer to start their feedback from Slack or get a reminder that the interview is coming up. These are all things that we've been thinking about from the beginning because, again, with no offense to the recruiting team, if you don't have the whole business bought into the importance of hiring and the need for them to play their part, and if you don't make it super easy for them to do that, sometimes by making sure they don't even have to log into the ATS, then you're just facing an uphill battle in terms of being able to deliver an incredible candidate experience. And so, we recognize to this day that, we have to work really hard to make sure that it's easy for the entire set of stakeholders involved in hiring to access Lever and do the work that they need to do.
Are you guys targeting a certain type of company as a client? I'm also curious what the basic price point of the product is.
Yeah, so on the type of client that we target, so being a Y Combinator company and growing out of Silicon Valley, in the early days, as you can imagine, our customers were mostly growth stage tech companies. So for instance, Lyft joined us as a beta customer at the very beginning. They were 80 employees. Today they're 2,000, and we've helped facilitate that growth. As time has gone by, and as we've started to build awareness, we're seeing quite an interesting diversification of customer. And I think when you look at the roster today, and in fact, if you look at we have this upcoming Talent Innovation Summit where some of our major customers are speaking. The range is pretty diverse. So I'll highlight a couple. So Cirque du Soleil, for example, came on board this year, and they're a 3,500 person company with some somewhat interesting recruiting needs, as you can imagine.
Sure.
So they've just rethought their entire candidate experience and recruiting strategy, and we're happy to be a part of that. So that's one example. Hot Topic, the clothing store, recently deployed with us. So Johnny Sanchez is going to be speaking at our summit around how they're using AI and data-driven recruiting. And, again, not classically a customer that you would have thought would gravitate toward Lever, but in Johnny's case, it's about being data-driven. It's also about putting very usable technology in the hands of those in the field who are trying to do the job of recruiting, and while doing a million other things. So I think it's really fun and exciting to see that diversification. We also have probably close to 20% of our customers outside of the US, even though today our footprint is solely in the US. So that's been fun to see that increase. And then to your point around price point, it does vary based on a couple of factors. So we have different plans for different sizes of company. The main variant, though, is sort of the size of the company. And so pricing for the smallest organizations that we work with starts around about $5,000 a year. And as you can imagine, for bigger deployments, it goes well into six figures, just depending on the complexity and which of our products they're buying as well, because we have Lever Hire, which is our core platform. We have Lever Nurture, and then we also have Lever Talent Intelligence, which is our enhanced reporting and analytics product, which is built on Tableau.
Has your pricing kind of evolved over the years since you've launched? I mean, I see a lot of HR tech vendors kind of struggle initially with their pricing overall. They're not quite sure what to charge. So tell me more about how you guys kind of go through that process, if you would.
Oh my gosh, that feels like a topic for another just altogether. I mean, I will say, I don't know if you saw, there was a report that Siftery, an organization called Siftery, published in May. Mm-hmm. And I spoke to a couple of the vendors around that time, and everybody was up in arms because it's really, really hard to your point, to get pricing right from the beginning. And so what happens in the case of fast-growing companies like ours, we've only had a product on the market for about 3 years now, and your pricing at the beginning is very different from where you settle on pricing, because first of all, you haven't built out the full product. Secondly, your earliest customers are taking an incredible leap of faith. Yeah. Because they've bought into the vision, they believe in the human beings involved in making that vision come to life, but they're not yet the beneficiaries of all of that capability. And so, today, to this day, I think if you ask any vendor who has been around for any period of time, their earliest customers are still on a very different pricing schedule than their sort of newest customers, because I think that's just an inevitable part of innovating and growing something from scratch.
Let's talk about content marketing for a bit, if you could, Leela. I'm curious, what your kind of overall strategy is from an ETS perspective, and how you use that data to create a funnel for sales.
Yeah, so as mentioned, I think recruiting leaders and their teams do love to learn and dissect best practices and see what their peers are up to. And I saw this firsthand at LinkedIn, actually. I published the first ebook that the Talent Solutions team did. It was the Employer Branding Playbook. Right. And and that was back in, I think it was either 2012 or 2013. And it was I think it was downloaded 15,000 times in the year that we had it out there. And it was just incredible to see how, the power, I think, of turning to your most advanced customers who are doing really interesting things and helping bring those best practices to light, basically elevating folks in the profession that were doing, as I said, sort of really interesting or innovative things. Mm-hmm. And so, to this day, I'm a big believer in content for this community because they are so hungry for seeing what others are doing and learning from others' experience. So, we certainly rely on content marketing as a top of funnel strategy to help get content out there that we think will genuinely help our audience, whether it's recruiting leaders. We've published things like an ATS buyer's guide to folks in the trenches. We've published tip sheets, and on our blog, we've continued ramping our blog content over time. So it's just it's lever.co/blog is the URL, and we publish probably 3 or 4 times a week. And we try and make it so that at least 1 or 2 of those posts feature best practices or advice or success stories from customers who have been doing cool things. So customers and the broader community. So for instance, Maya on our content marketing team has been publishing a series all summer called Ask the Sourcing Squad, which is, it's a series of posts where each week the team, the sourcing squad, which is everyone from individual recruiters at Netflix to Stacey Zapar and Lou Adler, are chiming in with answers to, a specific question around what their, what's their favorite reach out, or what subject lines have been working for them, or what tools are they particularly fond of. Just sort of covering the gamut of things that sourcers might care about, or full cycle recruiters who are doing sourcing. And so, I think series like that have been quite popular because really, I mean, on the one hand, we are sharing just with, really to help educate. But on the other, over time, what we hope is that people understand that we're, that focus that I mentioned on proactive recruitment is very real for us. It is very much a differentiator for our platform, the way we've thought about recruiting from the beginning. And so the hope is that over time, we become associated with proactive recruitment as sort of really the top choice platform if that's part of your strategy.
Yep. And I see you just started a conference as well now. I see a lot of vendors now come up with their own conferences. It's a new trend these days. So tell us a little bit about yours.
Yeah, well, again, I'm not going to pretend I'm not leaning heavily on my LinkedIn playbook. I was fortunate to be on the ground for the founding of Talent Connect, which is their flagship conference, and even had the privilege of running that beast for a few years. So
wow.
I've seen what happens when you bring the community together, when you bring together recruiting leaders and their teams to share, to connect, there's just magic that happens. Mm-hmm. And so we did our first what we call our Talent Innovation Summit last year. It was it was relatively modest affair. We had about 250 people there. We had several hundred more in the live stream, and the reaction was just extraordinary. I think people really enjoyed coming together with our team and with other folks from the broader Lever community to share ideas and just spend the day celebrating almost. And so we're expanding the program this year. We've got a day and a half of content, including something we're very excited about, which is the first half of the day. Sorry, the first day is an afternoon of that we're devoting to diversity and inclusion, which clearly has never been a more high-profile topic, I would say, in the world at large, let alone in recruitment and HR. And so we're really, excited to bring together a program which has got speakers from some very well-known organizations sharing exactly what they're doing at their organizations. Hopefully some provocative discussion around where we go from here with everything that's gone on. We have a panel of the majority. It started out being the white guy panel, but we realized that probably wasn't the most inclusive term either. So a panel on how the majority can, what's their role in helping minorities be successful at their organizations. So really, really looking forward to that. And then a full day conference the next day with speakers from, as I mentioned, Cirque du Soleil, the head of talent from Shopify, who's just, again, a phenomenal individual, just doing some really, really creative things. Tons of breakouts on some of the topics that we think our customers care most about. And just looking forward to it. I mean, we're in that. We're 28 days out now, so we're in that sort of full-on, I won't call it panic mode, but there's a lot to do. Yep. These events do not organize themselves, so got a lot going on at this end, but really, really looking forward to September 18th and 19th.
Nice. We look forward to that, and definitely events are hard to manage and plan, so kudos to you and your team. Hope you guys have a great show. As we wrap up the call, Leela, just last question here. I talk to a lot of HR tech startups in my consulting travels. Tell me from your perspective, what kind of advice do you have for them as far as what they should be doing to kind of gain traction and get their first clients off the ground?
Yeah, so I think over investing in your first clients, clearly helping them be successful. I think, one of the things that has become clear to me in working with our customers, and I just launched our second customer advisory council a couple of months ago, and so was in the room with some of our largest clients and asking the question of, why did you choose Lever? Why are you sitting here? And a lot of it comes down to how they feel that we are a genuine extension of their team. And I don't mean marketing specifically, of course. I mean everyone at Lever, and I feel like every other all hands that we have here at Lever, I'm trying to reinforce the part that when you talk about something like brand in this day and age, brand is basically, it's the sum of all of the touch points that your customer has with you, whether that is in the sales process, whether it's in implementation, whether it is in working with marketing on case studies, whether it's executive briefings, whether it is looking at the way that your team is posting online and interacting with that content. All of the things, basically, contribute to that brand reputation and brand standing. And so make sure that you overinvest in building incredible relationships with your customers, particularly your first customers, and get to know their stories, get to know how they're operating, and really go deep. And I think as a marketer, certainly, it's always been very powerful for me to be able to tell the stories authentically and know the stories. So, just overinvest in those relationships and listen, and make sure that you are seen to listen and that you circle back with them and help them understand how they are contributing to your product as you continue to evolve.
Nice. Well, sage advice. And Leela, thanks very much for joining me today. How can people connect with you and learn more about Lever?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, as you might expect. I'm also on Twitter at Leela Srin, Leelasrin. So feel free to reach out to me either way. And always happy to help others. All
right. Well, we'll link to you in the show notes as well. I'll see you in Vegas, and that's going to do it for this edition of the RecTech Podcast. Thanks again to our sponsor, and remember to check out jobs.com for your local hiring needs. Follow me on Twitter at Chris Russell, or visit rectechmedia.com. You can find the audio and links for this show on our blog. Subscribe via iTunes, Google Play, or SoundCloud. Thanks for listening, everyone.